Welcome back to Watch Talk with Rose City. Boom. What up, Ro?
It's hanging in there, man. Nice to hang with you.
Good to have you. I think we're trying to set the record for most watch episodes shot in a 24 to 48 hour period.
I know. Yeah. Beating the clock.
All right. So you had an excellent question that you presented to the watch table a moment ago. Why don't you lay it down real smooth?
Yeah, I'm a fan of good design. I love design. The question I had was that, are we going to see another revolution in watch design? Like, you know, the General Genta design was the AP, was it? The royaloak. And then the Nautilus, is another sort of fantastic design. And the thing about great design is, whether it's the Bauhaus movement, whether it's, a beautiful Jaguar or a Lamborghini, or just, even a beautiful table, an Eames, or once you see it, your reaction is, this is just genius and it's so obvious. Like, why didn't anyone think of it earlier, right? Once you see it, once it's there. But till it's there, nobody sort of envisions it.
Nobody can see it.
Nobody can see it. And that's, what makes those creators who come up with that kind of stuff so revolutionary.
That's a good question,
Yeah.
because it brings into stark contrast the tug of war between art and commerce, right? You want to do avant-garde art. It is across all designing disciplines, but you also want to sell it so you can have food for your family. And so I think the impact that Gerald Genta had, first of all, name another watch designer. Okay, George Daniels. Okay, name a few others. Okay, Roger Smith. Okay, that list, the more you fill that list out, the less people who are going to know those names.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like the number of painters or sculptors or Michelangelos or musicians. It's not the same for watch design. Yeah, we know it because we're knee deep in it, but I think the heart of the question is really, is something going to come along design-wise that will have as much of an effect on the industry as that did? I think that's tough to call.
Yeah. So let me bounce it back to you in two ways. So there's two levels at which this could happen. Actually, there are many dimensions, but broadly speaking, one revolution was just in something as foundational as the case design itself, right? The case shape.
Right.
So is our case shapes exhausted? And can we think of, or is it that there might still be some kind of shape in some number of dimensions that seems absurd to us, but if someone comes up with something that just works, it clicks, right?
Interesting.
So is there going to be, are we going to see something at the level of that kind of shift, right? That's significant in the way that Genta's design was a revolution, because I don't think people had thought of watches in that sense, right?
So so there's shape, and then there's material science,
and then there's the other, so there's shape and there's material. You're right. Material, though, is it works with design, but it to me it's more about other kinds of features. Like, the material itself doesn't radically sort of impact design.
Well, I don't know about that. It's like me and my buddy Kurt went to a bunch of ADs, tried on, of all things, a Panerai, which I enjoyed, even though it was the girl version that looked best on my wrist. But I held a Panerai Navy SEALs edition watch, like carbon fiber.
Right.
It's a $20,000 plastic watch. That's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
So, and yes, you could say Richard Mille watches are doing a lot with material science and design. But when you've got a watch that big, of course you can stuff a bunch of neat stuff into it.
Yeah.
That is not, I agree with that statement. I wasn't the first one to make it. I forget who did. I think it was maybe Fed. So credit to credit due. Other smarter watch folks have observed that. And it's just, I don't bash any brand. I don't bash Invicta. I don't bash Richard Mille. You do you. It's not the watch for me. It's gargantuan.
Yeah.
It's just not for me. But he's certainly one of the ones who is transforming a portion of the industry. Is that going to trickle down to the people? No. Not rocking 340 Gs. It's not. Yeah. But that's an important question.
Yeah, but that's one issue. And the other question then is that these designs that are radical, is it is there something in them that truly resonates? Are they truly universal in their appeal? I think they are. I think the ones that really work, there's something about them that, just just seizes the imagination of a lot of watch lovers. So it's not, whereas with some other brands, and again, not criticizing any brands, with some other brands, is it more hype? That's what I'm trying,
Well, it's like radical for radical's sake, as
Yeah.
opposed to having an idea and it just naturally becomes or is readily apparent as art.
Yeah.
And that's what Genta did. Even though those watches, he designed a bunch.
And he had his own brand too, right? Genta watches at some point.
Yeah,
I want to say.
absolutely. His watch did appear on the dial. To what extent he was involved in that firm, or when he sold his interest, I don't know that part. I would have to Google that. But I don't think that really brilliant design has to cost
Yep.
$1 million. It's like which Rack's focus pulls it back onto Microbrands.
Yeah.
Now, Microbrands are very interesting. They can do whatever they want design-wise, but they definitely need to sell.
Yeah.
And so that's like a lot of folks aren't high on the Dan Henry brand. One of the things I love is what his mission is.
Yeah,
he's a super duper collector who has all of these watches, and he's bringing these designs from the past, sometimes straightforward, sometimes merging them, and presenting a piece that has some excellent design with an affordable
And he's also keeping
quartz.
a whole sort of legacy of different designs alive. He's keeping the legacy of, and he's bringing. So I think I love those watches. I love all watches are great. Quartz, Mecha Quartz.
Mecha Quartz. That's what I was trying to.
Yeah. The other sort of question about design is that you can the other part of what I was going to say is that you can have something radical in terms of shape, right? A shape that people don't imagine, and it's an interesting question whether
Like work or resins.
Right, exactly. Those MBNF, is that what they're
MBNF,
called? Those kinds of things. Perhaps, even at a more accessible, more democratically accessible price point.
That's very well put.
That would be a revolution. The other,
They did. It's called Diesel.
Yeah.
Diesel makes those watches.
those kinds of watches. The other thing is, what we consider sort of incremental, right? Just within a sort of conservative framework or within the standard conventional, let's say most common round case watch, something like just simplicity, or like Hoyer's Chronos were, Carrera was revolutionary, right? Because it was clean and simple, and the idea was that it could be read easily by race car drivers and so on, right? And you see that beauty. Now, again, one complicated question that runs through all of this is that when these watches became popular and were sort of valorized for these qualities, was it because genuinely a large number of people recognized their beauty, or was it just because of hype, right? Because the Carreras
Jack Hoyer was a great marketer.
He was a great marketer, but even the vintage Carrera market, it was created by Jeff Stein is the name of the guy, right? He runs a discussion group, and there's a bunch of these collectors who really got into vintage Hoyers, and then
drove the market.
12, 15 years ago, I think the market started like moving up, and then maybe 5 years ago it was insanely high, and it's sort of come down a little bit, but the Octavias, Hoyers are still, the Carreras are still very expensive.
They're still rocking 6+.
Yeah.
I pulled up a watch here. Have you ever seen the Devon Tread watch?
I have not seen it.
It's those old clocks that on your parents' nightstand that flipped over.
Yeah.
But that device was just a massive thing of.
Right.
It's not the same principle, but it's close to it. Like all the numbers are on belts and going in multiple directions, and I think it's big as a horse. Yeah, look at that.
That's huge, and that guy seems like he has a huge wrist to begin with.
Yeah, Rose City would not be rocking.
Yeah, I would
you
not.
don't like that one.
I would not.
So I think you've seen the resins watches, yeah?
I like those, yes, and somehow I enjoy.
Oil filled.
Yeah, they look nice, but they look nice as design concepts, right? It's like high fashion. Like what you see on fashion runways is, or the equivalent, right? What most people wear on fashion runways in these fashion shows, they're not meant for everyday wear, right?
That's a true statement about fashion. I happen to have a soft spot for resins watches because it's like, because whenever you send in for service, it's like, hey, I got the oil changed on my watch. For a long time, that was one of my desirables.
Yeah.
And I think that watch is one of the watches that looks most like it is on the wrist of a starship captain.
It is a very cool watch.
Because the whole thing rotates around, and I just can't wrap. I would love to visit that.
And there's something that
factory.
something about the oil. It gives off some kind of color because it's used by divers, and there is a diving watch, right? That
No,
they have.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, I might be wrong about this.
It looks like a semi-dress watch. It almost looks like a smartwatch.
Yeah.
But I think it's neat, but it's unobtainium at 20 G's. I'm just not spending 20 grand on that. I'm just not. I can't picture a watch I would spend that money on.
Yeah. No, it's
Unless it was to buy something and flip it immediately.
yeah.
That's an interesting question. I guess the short answer to your question is no. I don't think we're going to see a design renaissance in the same way. Because don't forget, things were different back then to begin with. Like the baseline was different. Like you and I could start our own watch brand if we wanted. Let's get some venture capital. We'll do it on Kickstarter.
Yeah. There've been some really good watches, and
Yeah.
and I like what MK2 does, right? Bill Yao, that's his.
Oh, Mark II. I really like the Mark II watches.
They're hard to get, and
I've had a couple.
yeah.
Yeah, and what Bill, if you're not familiar with Mark II, what Bill Yao does is, and I should probably read it off his website. I don't want to pay him a disservice. I've got mad respect. But he draws on the inspiration of past models. A lot of them are Rolex designs.
Very classic.
I
models,
find that he does little things to improve them,
yeah.
which sounds like a crazy thing to say out loud. Let me give you an example. His Rolex Explorer 2 watch, which I owned briefly, it was a little too large, it was 42. The bezel rotated. So it had all the functionality of a Rolex Explorer 2 cave diving watch, but you could rotate the bezel as well. For me, that's an improvement on the design of the 1655, which led to the Explorer 2 line. Now, yes, there's nothing wrong with the Explorer 2 line as it is, but props to Bill saying, oh, I can improve this a little.
And he had this watch which I let go. I was dithering over it. I think Hawking is how it's pronounced, and it's based on the IWC, or it's
a field watch, pilot's watch.
It's a pilot's watch, the Mark 11, right?
Okay.
And I like the Mark 11 because the hands they're sort of rectangular at the end. They're not leaf hands.
Oh, right.
So I love it. So that's the classic. I think that was the classic Mark 11, and then the Mark 15. I want to say is the one. But the IWC are just priced absurdly high for fundamentally ETA movements. And this would have been, it would have been a great watch, and it was in a date and a non-date version, and I dithered, and now they're impossible to get.
He did a what was called a Project 300, which was a redux of the Omega Seamaster 300s from '68, the watch goes.
Yeah.
And I toyed with getting one of those for a while, and they were just cruising too high, like 2200, which is a lot for what it is. It's a quality watch. I just didn't want to go that deep on what was ultimately a tribute to it, and I ended up finding one of the Watchco ones, and I ended up going with that.
He also did a watch. I was on the list, and I had a chance to buy it, but again, it was too sort of sat too high on the wrist, too thick. The 50 fathoms, and I think it was this. The name completely escapes me. It was this American company that had he actually has brought out the rights to that name.
Wait, how?
It was double branded 50 fathoms.
50,000? Okay.
Yeah, let me just.
All right, we're going to pause for the cause. And we're back after doing some interneting. Rose City, back to you.
But the other really interesting watch that he revived or paid a tribute to was the Blancpain Tonic Ravel. I think he did it as the Tonic Ravel. That was a
vintage dive watch.
Vintage dive watch, and I think he bought the rights to the name. But again, it might have just been a little thick for me on the wrist. But gorgeous looking watch, and again, characteristic is the finish of his watches.
I would say absolutely, but I don't think it's a massive design change. Like
it isn't.
You're
right.
I think if we're gonna, for me, it's George Daniels and the coaxial escapement, which is a little bit nerdy.
Yeah.
And as much as it's more about the innards and the a fundamental change and improvement
So,
of how something
sorry to
works.
interrupt. I just realized that. So I'm thinking I've been defining design more in external terms, but I think we're talking about. I think what you say makes sense because design is both visible and
Yeah.
the sort of non-visible aspects.
Yeah,
of the design, right?
I was struggling to grasp something that
I
could
was
be
thinking-
perceived
yeah.
externally, and like the only thing I can come up with was that coaxial escapement, and then that's going to lead us into Grand Seiko Spring Drive.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, as we began this little journey, was exploring whether or not we thought there was going to be a revolution in design language exterior that amounts to a new art movement, the way that art goes through phases and so forth.
On that line, is that what the smartwatch is? Right? Because Apple smartwatches sell more watches than all
Yeah.
mechanical watches combined, right?
Is that a revolution? Yes. Yes is the short, quick answer. Is it as good or meaningful as what's been done in the past? Clearly, no. It's disposable technology, which
Yeah.
is part of its inherent downside. But I have one,
Yeah.
but I only use it for working out,
Yeah.
and I don't really work out. So I'm going to ponder on that. Let's both think on that.
Yeah,
Maybe
we
we'll
could come
to it.
back to this issue, and
And much like you educated me in the cricket game, there's sometimes a cricket match will end without a clear, defined winner. Sometimes a debate ends up the same way. So it's been great to spend time with you, brother, and thank you for sharing all of the musings, my man. This was a cool episode to do, bro.
Yeah, pleasure was mine. Take care.
We will catch you in the next one. Take care, and God bless.
Peace.